Welcome to RTB, the podcast for aviation geeks made by aviation geeks. In today's episode, the pilot who stole a secret Soviet fighter jet.
Imagine having a secret so valuable that flying a stolen Soviet fighter jet 400 miles over open ocean seems like a reasonable escape plan. That's exactly what happened in 1976 when one pilot changed the course of Cold War aviation history.
You're talking about Viktor Belenko and the MiG-25 incident. That single defection revealed more about Soviet military capabilities than years of satellite surveillance.
The fascinating thing is how this mysterious aircraft had Western intelligence completely fooled. They'd only caught glimpses of it in grainy satellite photos and tracked it outrunning Israeli fighters at 3 times the speed of sound. The Pentagon was convinced they were dealing with some kind of unstoppable superfighter.
And those massive wings that had everyone so worried, they turned out to be necessary just to keep this enormous steel beast in the air, right? Not for the incredible maneuverability everyone feared.
Exactly, man. The MiG-25 was essentially a hot rod made of welded steel, nearly as long as a World War II bomber, while the Americans were using sophisticated titanium in their SR-71 Blackbird. The Soviets went with brute force engineering, about 13,600 kilograms of fuel, feeding 2 massive engines producing 11 tons of thrust each.
What strikes me is how Belenko managed to pull off this escape, flying just 100 feet above the sea to avoid radar, navigating mostly from memory, and then landing this massive jet on a runway that was too short.
Well, the landing itself was incredible. The plane plowed through hundreds of feet of earth before stopping, and Belenko had to fire warning shots to keep civilians from taking pictures. But what really changed history was what happened next. Western intelligence finally got to examine their mysterious adversary up close.
And what they found must have been quite surprising. Those vacuum tubes instead of transistors, for instance. Though I understand there was actually an advantage to that older technology.
That's right, dude. The vacuum tubes made the electronics impervious to electromagnetic pulses from nuclear blasts, but the plane had serious limitations. If pilots exceeded Mach 2.8, the engines would literally start destroying themselves, the fuel pumps would get overwhelmed, and the compressor force would become so intense it would start consuming engine parts.
So much for the unstoppable superfighter they feared. How did this revelation impact military development on both sides?
Well, ironically, the fear of the MiG-25 pushed the US to develop the F-15 Eagle, which turned out to be one of the most successful fighter aircraft ever built, still in service 40 years later. And the Soviets learned from their mistakes, eventually creating the MiG-31, which was essentially what the MiG-25 was supposed to be all along.
The whole story really shows how fear and secrecy can create their own reality. Sometimes the mystery is more powerful than the truth.
And that's what makes this story so relevant today. Like, we're once again in an era of secret aircraft development and military capabilities that could be either overestimated or misunderstood. The lesson from the MiG-25 is that sometimes our fears about an adversary's capabilities can be more dangerous than their actual capabilities.
Though I imagine it would be much harder for someone like Belenko to pull off something similar today.
You're right about that. Modern security systems would make it nearly impossible. But Belenko's story had a happy ending. He became a US citizen, worked as an aeronautics engineer, and his artifacts from that historic flight are now in the CIA Museum. He passed away just recently in September 2023, leaving behind one of the most extraordinary stories of the Cold War.
Thanks for stopping by, friends. See you soon in the next episode of RTB. Happy landings.